Hey guys, Fortune Heroes
And gone.
from Team Misplayed here, bringing you another video for our channel. Today we're going to be discussing the top 10 decks of
The
this,
TCG.
the TCG. Let's keep that in mind. So first off, before we begin, I'd like to really stress that this is TCG. So we will be doing the deck list of all the TCG decks that exist, and this is our own opinion. You guys are entitled to your own opinions. So after you watch this video, please leave in the comment section below what you think are your top 10 decks, or even the top deck, or even if you don't think we've rated the decks right. So anyways, enough about that. Let's get started with number 10.
Infernity.
So infernities. The reason why I have infernities at number 10 personally is because of just a really bad, very inconsistent hands, in my opinion. Sure, there are cards that allow you to help out with that, but I feel like this deck has a very good chance of bricking hard in the early game stages, and I don't think the deck's viable to be a good deck like in a match form, especially against a lot of the big decks, because the big decks can swarm out on them. But that's my thought on it. So
I agree to a certain extent. Infernity is always a really good deck, but we get, if you watched our award show, we gave it Dark Horse because it's not played by many, but when it is played, it does do well. I don't know how Infernity are going to do with the new rule change, since we only have 5 cards in hand. If you're going first, they could do a lot better since there's less cards in hand. They could have a less chance of having all monsters or one less monster in their hand to work with. So that could be an advantage to Infernity. I don't know. We'll have to see how the format plays out. But for now, I'm agreeing, and we're going to put it at 10.
alright. So number 9 on our list is
Madolche.
so there's going to be a lot of backlash maybe about this deck. Honestly, I don't know what everyone likes or dislikes. But the reason we put Madolche so low on the list is because it is called the one-trick pony, as in real life. Like when you can't do more combos than one, when your deck's completely solely based on one big combo to happen, that's what we refer to as the one-trick pony, and that's what Madolche's is. Sure, like everyone keeps saying Angeli, but you got to realize that it's always going to be hoot cake, and it's always going to go into either Messengelato or maybe an Angeli if you have the cards to do that, or it'll go into whatever. Hoot cake is the one trick pony of the deck, and the one trick that it always does is go into tiramisu, always, constantly. So that's why I ranked it as low.
I agree. I mean, I'm a little harder on this standpoint. I feel Madolche have done a lot this format, and I mean not this format, past formats, and I feel they are extremely powerful. But they are one of those decks you would consider very one-trick pony-ish. Even though the deck is considered a combo-based deck, it is very linear, and it only has that one play. No matter how you play the deck, it's gonna do these weird plays that are always gonna just try and lead to one thing. They're always gonna try and lead to the tiramisu play, and that's all this deck does. It just goes to tiramisu. Like, sylvans are a combo based deck, but their plays do not always lead to the same card every single time you go into an exceed or a synchro. They are completely different every time.
Yeah.
So I just feel it's a very combo based deck, and combo based decks are very needed in this game, but if it only goes to one thing, then it's too predictable and it's too easily stopped.
Alright. So anyways, that's number 9. Number 8 is
Prophecy.
so again another backlash type of thing that could happen to us, but really this one's justified. Prophecy isn't the deck it once was. I stand very firm on that. The deck has very well been silenced, so to speak. You're gonna see it top every now and then. It's still as consistent as possible, but with Fate at 1 and only a certain amount of ways to use Fate, I mean, this deck is just like dead in its tracks finally. I mean, World's okay, Priestess is alright, and getting all the search with them is cool and all, but I feel like, that's it. Once once you stop like a couple of things in that deck, you know, I, I don't know. I just have a real bias towards prophecies, I guess, but that's my opinion on it. It's just like it's a very good searching deck. However, it lost its luster when Fate went to 1.
Not even that. Like, Prophecy have always been a good deck, but even in their prime, when they had Judgment, whatever that stupid card that was like plus 100, they still weren't at the best deck in the format. Dragon Rulers were. Even when this deck had all of its power, it still wasn't the best. And now that we've slowed down a bit, it is good. Like, it's a very slowish format with more setting. So Priestess is more a better card. It just lets you pop and you play the 1 rule, which nets you 2 cards back from your graveyard. But the deck, like other decks, it leads to 1 card. And if you stop that 1 card, it's kind of over. I mean, they have all the searching and all the plays, but if you can't do anything with all that searching, then it's all for naught. So that's why we put Prophecy at number 7.
Alright. So number 6 we have.
8, sorry.
Now you're confusing me.
Sorry.
Alright, so we're now at number 7. Number 7 is
Bhujans.
So why is Bhujan's higher than Prophecies, you may ask? And why is it even higher than Madolche's? Because Madolche's is a one-trick pony deck. Why is Bhujan's? Because it's even more of a one-trick pony. Here's the argument. Bhujan's, yes, their one-trick pony play is get Yamato on the field and start protecting Yamato as hard as possible. However, one thing you keep forgetting is cards like Kaiser Coliseum, Royal Decree, or other cards that of the cards of the Bhujans, like Bujinki, Hare, Turtle, the I don't know, that level 4 that pops a card. What else is there? Crane, Michizuki, and all Bhujan cards work off each other, number 1. Number 2, the Kaiser sets it up so that your opponent has to play at your speed. And number 3, if you run the Royal Decree build, where you throw down a Royal Decree, locks your opponent, pretty much. You're pretty much saying, no back row decks can play me, and no decks that can swarm me can play me, unless you can get rid of my monster first.
Yeah.
And then the access to their extra deck, they pretty much lock an opponent into their speed and then continue to slow them into death. And that's why I think it's better than Madolche's as far as a one-trick pony deck.
Yeah, I totally agree. I played against Bhujan, and if you don't... The thing is, they have so much searching. They don't special summon, is the problem. So they have 6 potential searches into Yamato, which is the 3 Tenki and the 3 Pada Duality. And as long as they get a first turn Yamato, they're always going to send something to protect the Yamato so it survives another turn. And they're always going to just keep pitching stuff to constantly protect it. And if they're not playing the Royal Decrees, they're going to be playing back row, so they're going to protect their Yamato even more. And then they're probably going to throw down a Kaiser Coliseum. So now you can only summon 1 monster. So now they probably have a Crane in hand, and you have to somehow get around that Yamato. Well, they protect it with Turtle, and they have a Crane. So you can't just like target it and blow it up, so because they'll protect it with the Turtle, and then if you attack, they're going to Crane. So Bhujans have a very well-placed deck where they can control how your opponent plays. And if you can it's a very control-based deck, and a control-based deck is very good. But it's very predictable in this case since it's just Yamato, basically.
Yeah. And one more added thing about it is that sure there are ways to get rid of the Kaiser Coliseum, but that's it. You have to focus on that card in that deck. But as you can see, there are many ways to stop this deck. That's why we can't rank it. That's why we can rank it higher than Madolche's, but we cannot rank it any higher than what it is. And that's why it's number 7. So at number 8, or no, I'm going backwards now. At number 6, we got
Sylvans.
Sylvans. The baby, the new deck, the up and comer, the greatest potential, and no one like that watches our videos knows how much I hate potential. because potential just means you have yet to do something. But sylvans, what's the best way to put it? Good, consistent deck. Bad as far as first turns if you don't have the correct cards. It's a very hand needy deck. If you don't have the right hand, that deck can stop and you lose. However, if you get the right hand, if you have the right setup, that deck can explode and kill your opponent instantly, almost. And or it can set up to kill your opponent next turn, and then your opponent can't respond to it because they've already set it up so well that they'd have to use too much resources to get rid of it. But like I said, the biggest drawback of it is its hands. The hands in this deck suck. Big time. And that's something me and Cody or Gunn have seen like happen constantly is with this deck because we test it. And especially with the new rule change. This deck is hurt by that new rule change because of how, and it opens pretty bad. So, but do not fret by its bad hands. It makes up for it in explosiveness, in my opinion. That's why I have it there.
I completely agree. Sylvans are purely, if Sylvans never opened bad, they would be undoubtedly the best deck ever. Is how I would put this deck.
But unfortunately, every deck opens bad, so.
And that's the problem. Sylvans play a lot of high-level monsters that are sometimes hard to get out of hand. Sagekoya not so much, but Hemtree is a big deal. And you can open with a handful of big monsters, but the deck is so explosive. Just double Lone Fire, Soul Charge, first turn is just instant, basically win. There's just so many deck plays that this deck can do, and it's undoubtedly the most complicated skill-based deck of this format.
Yeah, and another thing about it is that the manipulation's so good. Like, you don't understand if and here's how why people sometimes don't understand. There's a thing there's a difference between milling and or there's a difference between like manipulation and stacking. And this deck has legal manipulation in it, so you can manipulate to whatever play you want. And that's why it is number 6. It cannot be in the top 5 yet, though. Not yet. However, speaking of the top 5, before we get into the top 5, I'd like to say that these next couple decks are not actually ranked in per se, except the number 1 ranked deck, and that they're all based on opinion. So we do not have a number 5, but we do have a tie for 4th, and that tie is
Mythic Rulers and Mermails.
So we couldn't give it to one deck, honestly. And honestly, there's a lot of decks where it could be jumped here and there. The list can change in like a dead heartbeat, like in one snap of your fingers, and this list could be completely different. However, the reason why we can't rank one over the others, because both decks run into the same sort of problem, so to speak, is that just like Sylvans, their hands kind of get bad, and if you can open up pretty good in them, I mean, oh my god, they're good. But there's two differences to both decks. The Mermail deck, you need to open up certain cards that allow you to, you know, abuse the discard outlets and all that stuff. Mythic Rulers, however, open up certain cards to, you know, draw into more cards and or get rid of more cards from your deck. Ultimately, you want the dragons of your deck in Mythic Rulers, and that's basically something why both decks are different. However, when you come together, both decks suffer from the same thing, which is bad hands and inconsistent play. They're good decks, never you mind, but the problem is with their consistency, and that's something that Mermails hasn't had since Dragoons was at 3.
And from my standpoint, they both suffer from the same fatal flaw, in my opinion. It's almost the same as the fatal flaw of Sylvans. It's the hand. Mermails are very based on the hand. If you have the waters to open with the the plays, then you could be the most, like Dragoons and a Pisteus is an amazing opening. But you need that to open with. It's like there are certain waters you need to open with for the deck to be good. And you can't just pitch willy-nilly, because if your opponent doesn't have anything to pop, then you're just burning cards and you're not gaining the advantage you should be gaining in this deck. And that's Mermails used to be, and still is, considered to be one of the best one-for-one decks. And it pluses and it does things, but it has to be reliant on your opponent. So its hands are very dependent on your opponent. It also depends on what you have in your hand. Same thing goes for Dragon Rulers, and this in a way is a little different. Dragon Rulers are extremely powerful, but they rely so heavily on their draw engine, because they want to put dragons in the grave to draw cards, to put more dragons in the grave to draw more cards. So they're using the engine of drawing to put dragons in the grave so that they can see the Dragon Rulers, so they can make exceed plays. But if you don't draw your draw power cards and you just draw traps, or you draw your Dragon Rulers too early, then the deck just falls flat.
Yeah, and keep in mind Curry Bandit helps it a little bit, but the thing is it doesn't overpower over the deck, which is Mermails. And me being a past Mermail player, I've played the deck at its fullest. When it was at its peak, I've played the deck, and I understand where Mermail players come from when it comes to that deck, and I understand where it is now. So the next numbers we're going to talk about, number 3, we do not have a number 3, but we do have a tie for number 2, and that tie goes between
Yugioh and Lightsworn.
Now, why is Yugioh so high, you ask? Because Yugioh gear is gone. People have to understand what Yugioh is without Yugioh gear. Yugioh was a strong deck without Yugioh gear, but Yugioh gear exploded the deck. Now, I've said this in past videos. Yugioh is one of those decks that benefited from a new card coming out for them, to a point where they became a very powerful deck. With that card going to 1, however, the deck will slow down, but still be at its peak. You get me? There will be times where it's like, oh, this is terrible, I should have done this or whatever, but honestly, Yugioh still has its power. But it cannot outrank what Lightsworn is, and Lightsworn is kind of one of those decks where, yes, it's pretty predictable what happens. JD always happens. However, with new ways to get JD to your hand, with the new Lightsworn support that came out, and it's really helping the deck, honestly. Like, I built that deck. I have a profile of my actual build that will probably go up on the channel later, unless it's already up. I'm not sure, honestly. I'm kind of blanked on that, but either way, I've done my part on it. I've played the deck, and I've seen the power of the new cards and how they really help the deck just function better. But again, it suffers from the one thing, which is bad mills, bad draws, and your opponent being wise to what they are. Because if your opponent knows like going into a match, your opponent doesn't know what you're playing. Unless you're playing in the ARG circuit, then your opponent does know what you're playing. But if you're playing in the standard tournament, you're going against a player. Your player doesn't know what you're playing. Once you play it once against them, they won't let it happen again. That's something that Lightsworn suffer from.
And since light-based decks are kind of highly prevalent right now, Prophecy, Bhujans, and Lightsworn, a very commonly cited card is Light Imprisoning Mirror.
Another commonly cited card is also DD Crows start wrecking their plays. I mean, there's a lot of cards that really sided against these decks, really just, shut them down.
This is just a little tidbit, I started citing, I can't remember what it's called, but it's a card we used to both play. It's basically you discard one, and then you banish one card on the face-up on the field, and it banishes the rest in the graveyard.
Oh, you mean Karma Cut?
Yeah, Karma Cut. I started playing that again, because decks are reliant on one card, and if you can remove all those cards just from the game, it removes a lot of potential, especially against Lightsworn. I was testing it against Lightsworn. It's really good. You can remove a whole entire name from their graveyard that they won't be able to access again.
And that's one thing that the deck suffers from also is the lack of names. There's not really that many good light swarm, so they set up some certain names. But if you can hit one of their big names that they have 3 at or 2 at, then it becomes harder for them to put names in the graveyard. And even if you can hit that one name, if you can eliminate the chances of a Judgment Dragon from that deck, you've pretty much won. That deck can't function through losing that power. That's why it cannot trump Yugioh. Yugioh can trump any one of the decks under it, but it cannot trump. But it can be at the same level as Lightsworn, and that's why we don't have a real number 3. Now, before we say number 1, like I said before, each deck is entitled to their own opinion by whoever wants to opinion. So, like I said before, if you have an opinion, write in the comment section below. Now, for the number 1 deck of the format, and everyone's probably guessed it, and we've talked about it so many goddamn times I'm tired of talking about it. Number 1 is...
Magical hats.
the hat deck. How much do I hate talking about this deck? I probably want to bash my head in right now by talking about this deck, because I've talked about it too many goddamn times, and I'm excuse the language, but honestly, everyone talks about this deck so much. It's overexposed, overhyped, whatever. I get the artifacts are good, I get the trap tricks effects are good, and I get that the hands just really piss me off when I see one like crash or flip, but that's because that's why the deck's so good, honestly. If you did not see the World Qualifier ending, I suggest you go check it out. There's probably a video out there on YouTube for it. But watching the World Qualifier ending, it's 2 hat decks going against each other. Probably similar builds. One was playing Upstart Goblin, I think, and the other one wasn't. But basically, the deck was basically just, you know, playing super passive, waiting for your opponent to do something, reacting to your opponent, and blowing out your opponent. Now, the deck also functions on artifacts, helping you to make the comebacks. There was Call of Haunted's flipped every now and then. Wiretaps were used all the time. This deck is very good at slowing your opponent to like a pace where you're just wanting them to do something to activate cards. And activate until you pound it into their head constantly. And yes, I'm talking a lot about this deck, but I have a very strong dislike for hat in general. I'll have a whole rant video about it if you want. But just pound at your opponent constantly. Even if your opponent starts playing passive to you, you start pounding your your hands into them, and then you start gaining advantage. Or you flip the artifact and start messing up their own play so that they actually have to come at you. That deck is just way too good at doing what it does, and it's kind of annoying to me, honestly.
Yeah, hat is a deck that I was really... Yugioh weren't a problem to me. I mean, I guess Yugioh needed to go down, but maybe to 2. I mean, I feel hat should have been hit in some way. I feel Madolche or Sanctum. Like, they don't even play their MST anymore because they don't want to play the extra artifacts. They literally play the 3 Madolche and the 3 Sanctum, and that's all they play anymore. They would rather play MST over it because they don't have the targets to search with their artifact MST. So, but the deck is just... I have a pure hatred for a deck that literally does nothing unless your opponent does something. It's kind of like the deck just sits there and it's like, come at me, and then if you come at it, it's like, you just did all that for nothing. It's a very stupid deck that shouldn't be as good as it is, and I don't know, I just don't like it. I don't like decks that give you something for nothing.
Now, the argument here between me and him, our hatred is big toward the deck. However, we understand how good the deck is. We've played it, and we understand the plays to it, and we understand that the deck is actually very good. We just don't like the concept of it. I don't like playing against a wall. It's pretty much what I'm saying. What the deck is pretty much saying. You're playing against a wall. The wall just happens to have a face and can move. That's basically how hat works. And again, people have their own opinions. We get that. So you can go ahead and say whatever you want about that.
Just
I just
don't defend hat. If you defend hat, then don't even comment, please.
I'll allow you to defend hat to your to your greatest might, but I will crush all your hat comments just because of my hatred. I'm just playing with you. Everyone, again, I'm very considerate when it comes to certain things, so I get that people like these decks and all that. But anyway, that's enough about me ranting about this deck. This could be a whole entire hour-long discussion about how much I hate this deck. But it is worthy of number one, unfortunately. Now, what does that say about our championship that's happening here in a couple of weeks? Nothing, absolutely nothing. This entire setup is not set to the championship because we have our own thoughts on that. We'll have another video on that, actually, to be exact. But anyways, guys, that is our thoughts on the top 10 decks of the TCG currently. We'll have another video up maybe a month later, but whatever. So anyways, that is our video. Thank you guys for watching. Sure to comment in the section below, telling us, or in the comment section below, telling us what you think about everything, and what you think are the top 10 decks, or whatever your top deck is, or whatever. Like, comment, subscribe. Be on the lookout for more content on the channel, and that's all I've got. So, anyways, this has been Fortune Heroes.
Thank God.
From Team Misplayed sign now. Thank you for watching, guys, and we will see you guys next time.